Hello everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today I'll be doing a review of 2021 film The Wrath of Man, or simply just Wrath of Man, which was a new film by Guy Ritchie that came out this year, and is now available on Blu-ray and DVD. But before going into my review of this movie, please make sure that you smash that like button, light up that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey, and also make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with that bell notification turned on. That way you know every time a new video or live stream goes live on the channel. Sometimes I wonder how I even get through that opening bit right there. But anyway, so just the other day, I was able to finally see Wrath of Man. For those who have been following my channel for a while, you know that one of my favorite films of last year was The Gentleman, a film that unfortunately not a lot of people really saw, another film by Guy Ritchie, and it was just phenomenal. It was just so well written, it was so well paced. Everything about that film just made you want to keep watching and made you want to know more and more about what was going on in the story that was being presented there, especially when it was presenting certain things even out of order, not in a crazy sense like you would find in a film like Nolan's Memento, but in a way where you are having a story revealed to you and things that you thought you knew, because it's presented to you early on, you find out a little bit more about how they got to that point and then what actually happened after the fact. And so Wrath of Man is yet another great Guy Ritchie movie, and really, I have to say that from the very first sequence in this movie, I was hooked. In my last review, I talked about cinematography a lot because Pig has terrible cinematography. It has an insane amount of shaky cam, and it's shaky cam for the sake of shaky cam, and it just distracts you so much from the movie. This film, on the other hand, has absolutely impeccable cinematography, and it really comes down to that opening scene, most especially when in the very beginning you just have this long shot take inside of this money truck as it's essentially being robbed, and it stays exactly where it is. The frame stays exactly the same throughout, and it just lets you watch the sequence of events as it unfolds. And so one thing I've always really enjoyed about different filmmakers is when they're able to utilize and really take advantage of the long shot, of the long take. It's something that a lot of filmmakers nowadays don't really do because it can be very tricky, because if something goes wrong, you have to reset and do the entire thing all over again. And so it can make a lot of sense as to why a lot of filmmakers would try to avoid that, because if you have shorter sequences, it means that maybe you have to make up one of those sequences, but you don't have to make up the entire thing. And especially in a film like this, where what you are seeing on screen requires a lot of extras, requires a lot of actors on screen, being in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing, it was just really cool to see. And from that very moment, I was just like, oh my goodness, I was so enthralled. In fact, this might be one of the best opening sequences to a movie that I've seen since The Dark Knight. I still go back to The Dark Knight so often just to watch that opening bank robber scene, because it's just so well done and well made, and it really sets the tone for the film. This, I think, does the same exact thing, where even though it does not have a lot of crazy stuff going on as far as the camera shots and, crazy stunts or anything like that, because it just keeps you engrossed in the moment. Like, when you are just so focused on that sequence and the only thing the camera's really doing is maybe panning out just a little bit in that slow pan, that is something that is just so powerful and really is a great technique that I wish more filmmakers use, because it does, just by its nature, bring you in and drag you into the actual story of the movie. And that opening sequence, of course, sets the pace and sets the standard for the rest of the movie. And you find out a little bit more. I won't go into too many details because I don't want to spoil anything from the story, but essentially you find out that opening sequence is kind of the motivation for and the foundation of most of the events that happen in this movie. And so I would say that the cinematography is just downright awesome. It is just fantastic. And just for that alone, if you appreciate cinematography and if you appreciate camera work, I think that this would be a pretty great film to watch. Not to say that every single sequence in the film is as perfect or as well done as that first one, but man, oh man, that first one I think is well worth the price of admission alone, just because of how well it is done. Speaking now about the story, I think the story was actually also very solid and very good as well. I think that Jason Statham playing this character who has these various motivations because of certain events that happen in his life, I think that those motivations make a lot of sense. Also, the fact that he's just playing this quiet badass, so he's not saying a whole lot, which, to be honest, is actually fine for Jason Statham because, even though I really appreciate a lot of the films that he does, whenever he's given a lot of lines, sometimes you can just fall into the weeds a bit because you don't understand a lot of the things that he says because he has such a rich accent. I don't think I would ever want to see Statham try and do any other accent because I just don't think it would ever really play out play out that well. And sometimes they even are able to play up that fact to comedy when they give him a lot of lines and they give him like a lot of ridiculous things to say. You know, he's like, "Oh, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to beat you up." Like, there's just something, like certain movies where they're able to kind of play that up. In this movie, though, it's obviously a lot more of a serious film. It is an action thriller heist. I would say it's also a drama because of that very fact as well. And I think that they're able to use him in a very good way. All of the other supporting characters in this film are also very good. It says, you know, as far as the actual casting goes, you have Holt McCallany is in the film. Jeffrey Donovan is in the movie. So that's someone who, again, some people should probably recognize. Holt McCallany, I'm trying to see if they have him listed with his picture, because I think he was the guy who I recognized just a little bit there. So Christopher Francis Riley's in the film. What was interesting to me was that you had actually Josh Hartnett in the movie. I haven't seen Josh Hartnett in a movie for a long time. You know, he was always known to be like that heartthrob character, and he ends up playing this pretty interesting character. He's, you know, someone who's working for the security firm, and he, you know, comes off as a badass, but then you find out just a little bit more about how he actually is in more serious situations. And I just thought it was interesting seeing Josh Hartnett play a role like this, and it's great to see him in a Guy Ritchie film and to kind of be away from that heartthrob mentality or that heartthrob career path that he was on earlier on in his career. You also have in this film Scott Eastwood, and man, oh man, I tell you, the way that they had him set up with his makeup, especially, that dude, I mean, he already looks a lot like his father, Clint, but in this movie, I would say that's the most that he's ever looked like his father because of the way they had the makeup set up. And there were certain moments when even some of the lines he was saying, I was just like, oh, dang, he sounds a lot like his dad, too, in certain instances. And so that was another thing that kind of kept me interested in his character throughout the movie, because I was like, man, this guy's just like a young Clint Eastwood in a lot of ways, and obviously being his son. But it's just amazing whenever so many features from a parent goes into their child to the point where it's almost uncanny. And it's really fantastic. So acting, I think, overall is also pretty solid as well. The score to the movie, I would say, is also pretty good. I think that that's something that also helps the opening sequence as well, because as the opening sequence is going on, you have this, you know, this very serious, very ethereal, more ethereal-like score coming in, and I think that, you know, that presence throughout the movie is also something that kind of adds to the drama. The one thing I will say about the music is that I think it can sometimes be a little bit repetitive. It feels like it's the same tones over and over again, and there are certain moments where I'm like, I kind of wish there was a little bit more variation, even though the tones that were being used were incredibly effective in conveying and bringing about the emotions that the film wanted you to feel, and you know, building up the tension and everything like that, with it being a thriller film. And I think that definitely was a right move on their part. But, you know, it's again a minor nitpick there. I would like for them to have, you know, had a little bit more variation to that overall. And so as far as everything else is concerned, as far as the pacing and as far as the editing is concerned, I thought that it was also pretty good for the most part. The film does, I think, feel a little bit long towards the end. It's an hour and 19 minutes, so almost a 2-hour movie. And I think that's about a right length for this film. It could have been maybe even 5 minutes, you know, just a little shorter than that, but you don't really feel like the film is overly long, and you don't really, or you're not looking at your watch constantly like, oh my gosh, is this film ever going to end? Because it really is just a very well written, a very well paced, and a very well directed film. It's great to see Guy Ritchie back in his element these last couple of years. When I found out that this film was coming out, I was just amazed, because I had just seen The Gentleman, and it was so good. And typically when directors are making movies, you don't usually have movie after movie after movie, and all of them being good to boot. So it's just amazing that not only did he create one of my favorite films of last year, but Guy Ritchie has done it again. This is absolutely one of my favorite films of this year. You already know that I've talked about films like Nobody. Nobody, I think, is right now my favorite movie of this year. And there's a couple other films that I've enjoyed, like A Quiet Place Part 2. There was also one that I had completely forgotten about that I had even seen until I looked over at my website, because I've put some very small, very short film reviews just with the letter grades. But I had forgotten that I had seen the movie Boss Level, and that I thoroughly enjoyed that movie as well. It was a movie that was on Hulu. That was another film that I thought was one of the best of this year. Blood Red Sky is also one that I saw more recently, and I'm going to try and do a review on that at some point. But yeah, Wrath of Man is fantastic. And as you can see right up there, I give this film an A-. I think it's a very strong movie, yet another great Guy Ritchie film. And I just think that it's so amazing what they are able to do with this character, what they're able to do, with, the character played by Jason Statham, how they're able to make him so compelling without having to have too much dialogue. He doesn't have to really show that much emotion, and all he needs to do is essentially show anger, and you feel the anger, and you also feel and understand the character. And it's amazing when the writing is able to allow for the actor to not have to go through so many emotions because everything's already kind of built into the story. And I think that Guy Ritchie does a really good job with this, as he did have a pretty major part in the writing of the screenplay, though it is based off of another, I think in the beginning of the film movie, it said it was based off of a French film called Cash Truck, so a 2004 French action thriller. So it looks like this is a variation of that story. And to be honest, I'm interested to actually potentially watch that film at some point, though. When it comes to Guy Ritchie, it's hard. When he's in his element, it's really hard to match him, and it's really hard for me to imagine going to that movie and enjoying it as much as I did this film. But again, solid A- for this movie for me. But have you seen Wrath of Man? What are your thoughts? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you like this video, make sure you smash that like button, light up that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey. You guys are all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my August Locals, Patreon, and Subscribestar members. Starting off with my Locals crew: Cat's App, The Real It, D Sharp, Biffer the Hobbit, Robert Barnes, and Goblin Squatch. Thank you all very much for supporting me over on Locals. And now on to my Patreon members: Andrew Hoyle, Brian P., Christopher Bowman, Dion, Don Bruno de la Mancha, Father Christopher Miller, hail to you, Father. Father Damian Cook, Garrett Searles, Harold Francis, Inflamed Wood, Jacob Juice, Jeffrey Toone, Jonathan Carney, Lance, Laura, the Modern Major General's Story, Mike Jackson, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mondo Spieler, Mr. Peabody, On to June, Orange Hat Reviews, Out of Step with Reality, Priscilla Hall, Rosetta Allen, Teresa Martin, Theodore Benden, Tina Bojan, and Tina B., the Empress of the Universe. Thank you very much for supporting me over on Patreon. And lastly, to my Subscribestar peeps: Fast Reaction, Nosferatu Gatsu, John B., Perpetual Punster, Mr. Roy, Glinzer, J. Alex McCarthy Jr., Dean Heiss / the new number 2, J-Rod the Beer Guru, and ZK Man. Thank you all very much for supporting me on Subscribestar, and to everyone for supporting me on these platforms. Also, a shout out to all of my YouTube members. You get shouted out at the end of every single live stream. And if you want to have your name shouted out at the end of every live stream and every video, please check out my Locals Patreon Subscribestar. And you can go ahead and find those links in the top link of this description. You can find it's called the Willow link, and it'll have a list to literally all of the social media platforms and all of the different ways that you can support the channel. If you join at the $1 level, you can actually get your name shouted out at the end of every single video and live stream. $5 level gives you that, plus you get access to exclusive giveaways of 4K titles. Right now, I've got tons of 4K steelbooks to give away this month, including for Top Gun. I also have A Quiet Place Part 2. I have Snatch on 4K, the John Wick trilogy on 4K, and also I have a Sicario 4K disc as well, and a bunch of others that are going to be coming in this month too. So if you want to have access to any of those types of exclusive giveaways, join at the Army of Asgard level. At the $10 level, the Keeper of the Bifrost level, you get all of that, plus you get access to exclusive behind-the-scenes videos, including instant reactions when I go to see movies. I do quick little filmings of myself and talk about the films that I have seen and my instant reactions to that. You also get access to an exclusive podcast that I do with John the Flick Pick Flickinger once or twice a month, and you get to also ask us any question that you want. We put a Q&A post up, and you get to ask us whatever it is that you want to ask. So again, if that sounds cool to you, Keeper of the Bifrost level. And lastly, there is the Chosen of Valhalla level, where you get all of that stuff, plus in your first month as a Chosen of Valhalla member, you get a free t-shirt, your choice, ship it anywhere in the world, and also you get to once a month be featured on the OMB Reviews channel, and you get to talk with me. We usually chill out for 3 to 4 hours, and I ask everyone what they've been watching, what they want to talk about, what they want to promote, and it's always a really good time. And so if that sounds interesting to you, please consider joining. That is going to be on Subscribestar and on Patreon only, as Locals is just the Keeper of the Bifrost level. But anyway, thank you all very much for your time, for your support, and for listening to this shout-out video. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.